And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you all for joining us. We understand you have a lot of choices each and every morning. And again, we're so thankful that you're here with us to start the day on the right side. Again, we are very proudly conservative, very proudly a faith-based program, family-friendly, and, of course, doing our very best to promote and keep those values here in the state of Idaho or anywhere across the country at KIDOTalkRadio.com or on the KIDO Talk Radio app. You can take that anywhere. So if you're vacationing, you can tune in. If you're east of the Great River, like my family, my mom, you can catch us anytime. Or if you're a man of the world, like Tea Party Bob, you just tap the app on your phone and you're ready to go. Well, what happens now? The shutdown continues. Government workers are missing their checks. What responsibility, if any, do the Democrats have? And let's talk a little bit about the future of the Supreme Court. Our next guest, Ron Nadelson, joining us from Colorado. And good to have a fellow person from the Mountain Time Zone with us, sir. Good morning, and thank you for waking up early with us.
It's great to be with you. I guess I've spent almost all my life in the Mountain Time Zone. I taught for many years at the University of Montana constitutional law. I was telling your scheduler that my brother lives in Idaho, and of course, as you mentioned, I'm with the Independence Institute in Denver.
Well, you're right. Independence Institute, you're a senior advisor to the Convention of States, and we might get into that. A lot of people are fired up about the Convention of States. Some people not so happy about this, but let's talk a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and whether or not she stays or goes. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, appointments to the Supreme Court are for life. However, there has developed over the years a pattern whereby when a judge simply passes the time when he or she can't perform well anymore, that the rest of the court politely tell that judge it's time to retire. This was most famously in the case of Hugo Black, who I think was over 90. I don't know if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is incapable of performing her duties. She has trouble, I understand, staying awake during oral argument, but frankly, so do I. So that's a decision probably the other members of the court would have to make. It's also, though, an advertisement for the need for term limits on the Supreme Court, which would have to come through a constitutional amendment, presumably through a convention of the states.
Well, let's get to the Convention of States. Many people here are interested, yet there is a vocal opposition. They say, don't mess up a good thing. Why have a Convention of States?
The Constitution is not being followed, and a lot of the dysfunction of the federal government is a reflection of that. Historically, constitutional amendments have proven very powerful tools for reform. So even when the courts and the Congress don't follow the original Constitution, they do follow amendments. I mean, the Bill of Rights is a notable example, not in 100% effective force today, but certainly has a great amount of strength more than 200 years after they were passed. Term limits on the president were adopted over 60 years ago. Same thing. Nobody's even really tried to crack them. So amendments are a powerful way of straightening things out, and it was the method given to us by our founders for responding in precisely the situation we face now.
Okay, but again, going back to it may not be a perfect system right now. If all of a sudden you change it, then you could just have an erosion of rights that are already under siege.
Any proposed amendments would come from a convention, that is a meeting of representatives of the state legislatures. That convention is limited as to agenda according to how the state legislatures secured its call. In other words, state legislatures pass applications and they'll say, we want a convention only on these subjects, and the convention is limited to that. There are folks out there who will tell you that a convention can't be limited. Frankly, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't read any of the research that's come down over the past decade or so. The convention, so we can focus the convention on those areas that need reform and ruling out any change in the Constitution for those portions, the majority of it, of course, that we want to keep.
So how would it actually work, a convention of states here on KIDO Talk Radio, sir?
What would happen is that 34 states, that is two-thirds of the state legislatures, would pass resolutions. These are called applications, asking for a convention on one or more topics. In the case of the Convention of States application, and that's a brand name here, it would be fiscal restraints on the federal government, term limits on federal officials, and reductions in the size and scope of the federal government. That would be the limit. You couldn't mess with the Bill of Rights, or you couldn't get into such things as the electoral system. Once 34 states adopted that, under the Constitution, Congress is required to invite the states to a convention. They then meet. Each state has one vote.
Right.
They decide whether to propose an amendment or not. If they do propose an amendment within their agenda, then it goes back to the states, and you need 38 states to pass. That's a very, very high margin, meaning that nothing that's squirrely or lacks broad support is going to get through that margin. But some of the things that we need, like term limits or a balanced budget amendment, or perhaps a trimming of the federal government spending power, those very likely would have supermajority support.
Sure, but I think one of our biggest fears would be that, if we have a convention of states of Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison, such a unique cohort, if you will, unique group, that's one thing. But if you have a group of, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Cortez, that would be quite a different America from what we have today. And just the basic ignorance of a lot of elected officials scares the heck out of people that would really be concerned about unlocking Pandora's box. How can we be sure that the good people get in and keep the Constitution or reform the Constitution, and all of a sudden we don't have, like Kristen Gillibrand saying that health care is a human right, and we become Venezuela?
Well, I can give you one guarantee. There are no guarantees in politics except one, and that is that if we don't have a convention like that, the people who are in control, they are the people like the Pelosi's and the Gillibrands, are going to be continuing to driving the country in the wrong direction. The convention, which is directed at the state level, and we all have quarrels with our state legislatures, but by and large, our state legislatures, I think, tend to be composed of people who have a good deal more sense than some of the folks in Washington. Because it is directed by the state legislatures, they can make sure that doesn't happen. I also should mention that this is not a project of writing a whole new constitution. You don't need Hamiltons or Madisons to write a single amendment. Congress has done it many times, and sometimes Congress is not particularly competent, but they've managed to do such things as draft an amendment by which the president can't serve more than 2 terms. They could simply draft an amendment that says that a Supreme Court justice will not serve more than 1 long term. That's not rocket science. So this is not like we're starting all over. On the contrary, the whole purpose of this is to push us back more toward our founding era principles and write the government in a way it was supposed to be, to operate more like it was supposed to operate. That's the purpose of the system, and that's why the founders gave us this convention mechanism. One reason that we're so out of balance now is precisely because we've not used this mechanism in the past.
Well, back to the shutdown and how it's impacting people in Colorado. Are you guys feeling anything?
Well, there's a very large federal center located, I would say, no more than a mile from my house. It's what they call a federal enclave, where hundreds, perhaps thousands of federal workers work. And yet, the vast majority of us are not feeling anything. The shutdowns, whilst in some ways unfortunate, are an object lesson that we really don't need the federal government to do all those things that the federal government is doing. I mean, the federal government was set up to do a few basic things like national defense and regulating commerce and so forth. It wasn't set up to be our national school board. It wasn't set up to tell us what light bulbs we should use or what toilets we can install in our homes. I think there are very few people who would miss those aspects of the federal government if it went away, and I think the system would work a lot better.
Well, Mr. Natelson, Dr. Natelson, we appreciate it, and you still love all about the Grizz?
Don't follow the Grizz much these days. I left the University of Montana about 8 years ago, and so the Grizz kind of fell off my.
I don't know. From what I hear about the Grizz people, it's like once you're there, it's wherever you are, it's like go Grizz for the rest of your life. That's what I hear.
I think that's true for many people, but if you Google my name, you'll find that because I'm a conservative, I did not have the greatest of experiences at the University of Montana, to put it mildly.
Well, what's the deal with the libs invading conservatism? And Montana used to be a conservative state, but we have the same argument here at Boise State University. It's like the libs come in and take over.
Well, actually, Kevin, Montana was never a conservative state. In many ways, Montana is a very different state from Idaho or Colorado or Utah. Montana was part of that prairie socialist tradition that prevailed, or populist tradition that prevailed in the Dakotas and Minnesota for many years. Now, the state is trending more to the right, but the University of Montana has always been kind of hard left, and I think it's more so now than ever. Sometimes, Kevin, we got to get on and we'll talk about the problems in higher education and how we can deal with them.
We're on the case. Finally, how did your state flip? Were you there when that happened? Can I blame you on that, sir?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How did Colorado go from, reliably conservative to purple or blue? By gosh, I mean, what happened there?
Well, Colorado has been a split state for quite a few years. I mean, Colorado's had only one Republican governor, I think, over the past 25 years or so. But it's been competitive.
Yeah.
However, I think that the major reason why the state has become more and more blue is people moving in. People who do not have the understanding or the sympathy with Western values. I'm an outdoors guy, and I spend a lot of time in the Rockies, and I see these people, walking around on the trails, people who are from elsewhere who know nothing about the mountains, who know nothing about protecting themselves in the outdoors, and that translates also into the political system. They assume that because things were like they were back in California or Oregon, that they should be the same way in Colorado. And of course, that's one of the problems with uncontrolled immigration. You've got to be able to acculturate people to their new home. And unfortunately, that's not fully happened in Colorado.
Well, you could say that in the country. Dr. Nadelson, we would love to have you back. Really appreciate your service, and great to have a fellow Mountain Time Zone person on with us so early in the morning.
It's been a pleasure. You have a great day, Kevin.
Thank you. All right, our great friend, Dr. Ron Nadelson, joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning here from Colorado. Government shutdown continuing. We'll get your thoughts on that. Also, big news day today. We've got Procter & Gamble challenges men to shave their toxic masculinity in a new Gillette ad. Can you believe this? Men under attack, under siege, and we have a major corporation, Gillette, attacking men and to shave off your toxic masculinity. By the way, that was the subject of yesterday's Kevin Miller Show Facebook site, if you'd like to check that out. Lots of great comments, but we do it the old-fashioned way here on Idaho's first radio station, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I love this. Spot Peg to hashtag MeToo asks, is this the best a man can get? Can't wait to hear from you next. Kevin Miller, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. The government shutdown continues, and we're taking your calls. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up, Timmy Kenner wants to change his name to Eternal Love. How insensitive could this accused murderer be? We'll get your reaction, but first, we go to Tom in Meridian with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Kevin. First of all, I listen to you every day because I like AM Coast to Coast, and unfortunately you come on after they go off. About 30% of what you say I really agree with. The other 70%, you're more Trumpian than Fox. And I guess today you were talking about the shutdown. I'm a retired civil service employee. I was very fortunate to work for the government when I did. I went through a couple of shutdowns where they were short. What they say is if you're an essential employee, you have to work even though you're not getting paid. So those people are not coming up because they want to. They are required to go to work, but they don't get paid. That doesn't make sense to me. Fortunately, none of ours ever lasted this long. I think what they should, and if you look at like parks and that, there's no essential employees there, so all the parks are closing or they're being maintained by state employees. Besides the 800,000 civil service employees that are being hurt, you're hurting contractors, little business, a whole lot of people that can't get benefits from the government. I know you believe that Trump should build his wall, and I agree that we need better security. But I'm not sure a wall is the most effective thing. And a wall, the $500 billion or whatever or $5 billion that he wants, will not come anywhere near building 10% of the wall. There's a whole lot of places the wall will never be built because of eminent domain and private property. They'll be in court forever. There are sections where because of wildlife migration, they'll never get it in. There's a whole lot of things we could do. We don't have cell service along the wall. That ought to be the first thing we do is get cell service for our guards that are down there. We ought to change our deal on migrants coming into this country so that as soon as they get in, they are not a citizen or cannot stay. We could change some of those things and eliminate the problems. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to pass. And the other thing, one of you said is that civil service employees had excellent retirement. They did prior to 1992. It changed. It is terrible now.
So you're saying, wait a minute, you're saying your retirement isn't good?
No, mine is excellent
Yeah.
because I retired under the old system.
Right.
In 1992, they changed it.
No, my family was like you. They civil servants. My father, an excellent example, but I'm sure Tom, like you, you didn't do it just for the benefits and that. You did it because it is a sense of serving your country. And I don't like I don't like to use this term, but the government screwed over the workers by cutting the benefits. I totally get it, but you look at all benefits by the godless corporations, and they've all been screwed. I'm not endorsing it, but there are a lot of federal employees that, they work 3 or 4 days. They have time to work out. They have a lot of things that people in the private sector don't have.
They're doing stuff like working at home. It doesn't make sense to me, all the things they're doing. But it isn't just the government's doing that. We've got a change in attitude.
I totally agree with you.
I hate the extremes we have in politics today, and Trump certainly represents the extreme to the right. I don't like Bernie Sanders.
Well, but here's the other one, Tom. And by the way, you can join the conversation with us at KIDO Talk Radio. Here's the other one, though. I mean, Trump's there in the White House asking these guys to come back, and you got 30 Democratic lawmakers in Puerto Rico over the weekend sunning themselves. And quite frankly, I've seen the pictures, and I really wish they would have, kept the clothes on. I don't need to see Bob Menendez in a Speedo.
Yeah.
But where's Trump is extreme. You can't say that Nancy Pelosi is not and Schumer aren't extreme because they believe
Why don't we open up all the divisions of government except Homeland Security and then debate the benefits of how we provide safety and include in that immigration, include in that all those things, the 14th Amendment, how those kids can be born here and be a citizen of the U.S. There's a whole lot of things that would be covered. But the money he's asking for that wall will not build the wall. I don't know what the total cost is. I've heard anywhere from $70 billion to $350 billion. We'll never have the wall. It'll never be built.
Well, you're an optimist.
Well, no, but you can't afford it.
Well, I think we can't afford not to.
Well, I disagree with you. We can't afford not to have better Homeland Security. Why don't we have cell towers down there that the guards can pick up a cell phone and call for help anytime? Why don't we have more drones working down there so they can pick those people up? We don't have that.
Tom, you need to call in more often.
Well, I was a staunch conservative for a long time, and I've always enjoyed politics. I guess Gingrich turned me into a Democrat when he investigated Clinton, and at the time was having an affair, and his wife was in the hospital for cancer.
Tom, I'm with you. I got to run, but appreciate the spirited debate this morning.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
And Tom.
Yes.
Thank you for your service. You take care, brother.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Tom's fired up tomorrow. KIDO Talk Radio time is 6:29. Going to be wet and snowy. Please be very careful with the details on your morning commute.
I'm News Channel 7's Eric Everett.
KIDO Talk Radio time, 6:30. Kevin Miller in the morning. Coming up next, Timmy Kenner wants to change his name to Eternal Love. How insensitive can this accused killer be? We'll talk about it next. Thank you for starting your day on the right side. KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
And blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Don't forget, coming up this afternoon, Sean Hannity with day 2 of the William Barr confirmation grilling. Don't forget, Sean Hannity exclusively right here on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio, talking about the government shutdown and the Barr nomination. We'll get to that in a minute, but exclusively Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. Live from London, Simon Owen joining us now. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Kevin.
You know, it's fascinating to look at the parliamentary form of government versus our form of government here. When I saw the reaction of the Brexit vote going down, Prime Minister May in defeat, and then you had people just piling on, it really reminded me of some of our sporting events here. There's a lot of trash talk in the British Parliament, huh?
Well, I mean, they tend not to hold back. There can be some robust exchanges, I suppose, and there's certainly a lot of oohing and ahhing and hearing and shouting things down. But one noise that I thought really stood out last night was the sound of somebody saying, wow, and the intake of breath as the result of last night's big vote in Parliament came back. This was the vote on Prime Minister Theresa May's proposals for the divorce terms for Britain and the European Union. 2.5 years after the Brexit referendum, when voters here said they wanted to leave the EU, May has negotiated a divorce with the European Union. It went to lawmakers last night, and she ended up suffering the biggest parliamentary defeat on record for a UK government. This was crushing, and it leaves all sorts of questions up in the air about where Britain goes from here, because you know, there is just paralysis, it seems now, and no sign of a solution. So, yeah, I mean, you talk about the different systems of government, but equally in their different ways. America and Great Britain, the two of the great old democracies, currently facing different kind of sticky situations where nothing seems to budge.
Indeed. So what does this mean? And we heard this was I guess, Simon, I'll ask you in my own way to translate the defeat yesterday, the largest ever, so embarrassing, a lot of hyperbole. What's the skinny?
Well, what it means is really unclear, because this hasn't happened before. You know, no one's left the EU before. This kind of exit hasn't been done, and so these are uncharted waters, and there are various options. Theresa May is saying she wants to talk with lawmakers on all sides of politics and figure out what, in her words, she said she wants to learn what could bring lawmakers round. She said, so that we can identify what could secure the support of this House so that we can deliver on the referendum result. But the fact that this was such a massive defeat, you know, of historic proportions, suggests to me that there's not much she's going to be able to secure from lawmakers that would be actually negotiable in Brussels. And indeed, after the result came in last night, Theresa May said, tonight's vote tells us the House does not support this deal, but it tells us nothing about what it does support. And there's a huge breadth of opinions as to what this deal should be replaced with. And I'm not sure if anyone else in the British Parliament has another idea that would stand a better chance of actually garnering majority support among lawmakers. So Theresa May is presumably going to talk with lawmakers, figure out what kind of compromises she might go back to Brussels with. But we've had a statement from the EU this morning saying this withdrawal agreement is not open for renegotiation. So there's not going to be much by the sound of things that she's able to do. So to answer your question as to what's the skinny and what might happen next, all sorts. She could call an election. She could, believe it or not, call a second referendum. That's one of the ideas being mentioned. But at the moment, Britain is on course for what's become known as a no-deal Brexit. She's unable to get anything through Parliament, and she sticks to the deadline of March 29th, doesn't ask for it to be extended. Then in that case, on March 29th at 11 p.m. London time, Britain and the EU will simply cease to be connected. And everything from trade to immigration to security, ties will be cut overnight. And there are some people here who think that that's a good idea, that they want a clean break, but it's not got anywhere near majority support among lawmakers, or I don't think the population either. And I was out with protesters in London yesterday, and even those who want this clean break Brexit or cliff edge Brexit, however you want to characterise it, even they say it would be messy for a time. And there's lots of people here who don't like the thought of that. If you're a business leader, a lot of business people say that they're concerned about the prospect of this kind of no deal. But that is where Britain is headed as we stand.
Any impact on America?
Well, I mean, it depends how you want to look at it. I mean, directly, there's nothing obvious. But if this gets really nasty and really messy for Britain, then this is the fifth largest economy in the world, and that's the sort of size economy that, you know, if there's trouble here, that can have impacts on money markets. But I also think there's a curious, wider point here, which is, you know, this is becoming an impossible situation for the British government. And if you look at a totally different situation in France in recent weeks, the kind of protests that they've had there, anti-government protests, within 3 or 4 weekends of violence, the president was appearing in nationwide TV addresses and essentially, you know, appealing for calm and offering concessions in the face of protests that hadn't really lasted that long. You know, there are some tricky politics out there at the moment for Western democracies, and I mean, you're seeing it in America with this shutdown and no sign of a breakthrough on that, as far as I can tell. So, you know, these are interesting times, that's for sure. I mean, they always are in some way or another, but particularly at the moment, it's there are sticky subjects all over the place, and for Britain, Brexit is proving to be very sticky indeed.
Simon, we appreciate your insight and excellent reporting as always. You have a great day, sir.
Thanks, Kevin.
Simon Owen joining us. It is 6:42. Watch out for the snow and the ice. And we don't really have to worry about you because you're smart. You drive defensively. You're not texting and driving. By the way, congratulations to our friend Mike Miniger. I don't know if Mike is up yet working from Mike Miniger's Auto Body, but what was it, 100 or 175 crashes yesterday? Now, we could do the usual Kevin Miller thing and get snarky and pithy and bloviate about all those folks coming in from California and everywhere else. But really, when you have so many accidents and the snow really wasn't that much yesterday, well, look, it's inattentive driving, it's distracted driving, it's people going way too fast. Look, we've all been guilty of that. You know, you can do everything right and still get into an accident. You can do everything right and still some knucklehead will all of a sudden veer in your lane or something of that nature. You can do everything right, and somebody who has been up too long can, you know, hallucinate and see something and swerve at you. It's very dangerous. And if I had one wish for the Idaho legislature, and this is there are two wishes. There are two wishes for our brothers and sisters at the legislature. Hopefully they're up. Hopefully they're listening. Hopefully they're doing something. Kevin, why do you beat up on the legislators? Well, they asked for the job. They weren't drafted, and with great power comes great responsibility. Just ask Spider-Man. But my two wishes for the Idaho legislature. Number one, grocery tax repeal. And every day, right here, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, Kevin Miller in the morning, we're going to be the Repeal the Grocery Tax show on the Repeal the Grocery Tax station. That is my one wish. We had a young lady calling in, Gina, saying, well, I think the grocery tax is good. I like paying taxes. Well, Gina, you could pay my taxes. That'd be great. However, if I had one wish outside of repealing the grocery tax, it would be for our elected officials. And I know ACHD Commissioner Kent Goldthorpe, maybe he's listening, maybe Mike Miniger is listening, maybe they're not. That somebody would solve the chaotic cacophony, and don't ask me to say that again or try to spell it, of frustration that is driving in the morning and driving out in the afternoon. We always take it as a compliment here, Ray Amaya and myself, when people say, Kevin, you get me in from Caldwell to Boise, or from Notice to Boise, or from Mountain Home to Meridian. That's a long commute. And if you have a big car, maybe you think contrary to good old Kay Millie, and you have a big truck, and you're room riding around, and that's great. And no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable your vehicle may be, Oh, it is so frustrating. Let's say you're coming in from Middleton. You can either take the highway or the freeway, whatever you want to call it, and come in. And that's high-speed frustration. Or you can take the Chinese water torture way. Can you still say that? Drip, 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 drip. And do State Street. And you can live a little, take the highway to nowhere there on 16 and go boom Chinden or boom to 10 Mile and then hit the highway. But I feel your pain when you're driving in the morning. And maybe in the morning it's okay because your senses are dulled. But in the afternoon when you just want to go home and you just want to have time with your family. Or if you're like Kevin Miller, look, I just want to watch the shows. And I love Mrs. Miller. Sometimes Mrs. Miller will come home from the Hope Blooms flower shop, and all of a sudden she'll want to talk, or more time with the granddaughter. And I go, I just want to watch the shows, which is very insensitive on my part. But after being locked in that vehicle, and then you've got choices of radio. And look, Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, they do a great job. And you're thinking, look, I just, up and back. And then sometimes the lanes are stopped because we have to pave the roads and we have to constrict everything. And look, St. Luke's is a wonderful place, largest public-private employer in the state. But we closed down State Street for St. Luke's expansion. Great for St. Luke's, not so good for the ordinary average consumer, which is where this show resonates. So my one wish for everyone would be, goodness gracious, guys and gals, solve the traffic congestion problems. Now, we have some new Ada County commissioners. I'm sorry to see the Republicans leave, especially Jim Tibbs, a wonderful young man. We appreciate him. Hopefully he'll be back. We can get the libs out. But we have real concrete problems. If I ever ran for office, it would be education, transportation, law enforcement, and not in that particular order. Those are the issues that impact our lives the biggest. And yet we're talking about vaccinating 12th graders, or who knows what they're doing. And good for them. Repeal the grocery tax. And one more thing, I don't want anyone to be confused. We are in so support of the current governor and his stance against legalizing marijuana, legalizing the gateway drug. We will proudly support Governor Brad Little. That's a lonely gambit that he's out there. We have your back, sir, on that one. Let's get to the phones. Hank! Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller. Good morning.
Good morning. I think that the caller, that the government employee was saying that the wall was not really effective. I think that the key is getting the wall in those areas where the current invasion is taking place. In other words, where the most crossings are made, basically sections in Arizona and Texas. I don't think anybody expects a full wall from coast to coast, but as time goes on, we need to put walls where the migrants and the illegals are coming from. And a wall does slow it down, and that's the point. In other words, if you can slow the mass migration down, it's better. It makes it easier to get things under control. Nobody's under any illusion that anything is a complete pancreas, but I don't see drones as an effective answer to the problem. And of course, they need to be the legal things. We need to challenge, for instance, the erroneous interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which the courts have imposed on, which was never the intent of Senator Howard or the other people who pushed the 14th Amendment post-Civil War, and also changes our immigration thing in terms of requiring sanctuary, that this has to be done outside the country. Now, as far as the point on the Constitutional Convention, George Mason was the one in the Constitutional Convention that put the Article 5 in the Constitution, in the Constitutional Convention. He made the point that Congress would never, if Congress became tyrannous, there'd be no way that they would amend themselves. There has to be a process. In other words, give you an example. There's no way Congress is going to vote for term limits. It has to come from a convention. There's no way that you're going to have to put restraints on the administrative state in terms of rulemaking, because that's the Democrats' bread and butter. It's never going to happen for Congress. You're going to have a constitutional convention to do this. There's no way that you're going to have reform of the courts in terms of these lifetime appointees and having some mechanism by the states and the Congress to overturn the obnoxious Supreme Court decisions. Again, this has to come through a constitutional convention. To do nothing is to lose our Constitution anyway. The people who cry about not having runaway convention, we have a runaway situation now. We're losing our Constitution if we do not act. I mean, they're not recognizing the reality. It's like an ostrich sticking their head in the ground and pretending that somehow we just keep the written paper as it is. And the fact is, the liberals are changing the Constitution. In other words, the whole point of the liberals saying a living Constitution means that they're basically subverting the document. In other words, we need mechanism in terms of limiting these people in their actions, the radical progressives. So I don't buy to this theory that runaway conventions. They are limited by what the state legislature asks for. If they bother to read the Fifth Amendment. Now, I'm surprised people who claim to be constitutional that sometimes call on this show have display the most amount of ignorance about what the Fifth Amendment actually says it does. That has always astounded me.
All right, Hank, thanks for the call. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up, a new Attorney General meets the senators. First, you're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning. Okay, coming up, Fox News on your radio. Kevin Miller, good morning.